Today we're going to create a sample called Turned and Stitched. To start that, you would create a plain seam. So you're going to put the right sides of your fabric together, and we're going to stitch a seam 5/8 inch down the edge of your fabric. So Turned and Stitched is the finish that's going to be on the edge, but we need to make a plain seam in order to make a Turned and Stitched sample. So I'm going to stitch a seam. I'm doing 5/8 of an inch. Make sure at the start and the end you back stitch so that your seam is secure, because this is a permanent seam. We're going to be keeping it. Clip your threads so that it's nice and tidy, and then when you go to the iron, you're going to take your sample and you're going to fold over that seam allowance a little bit of the fabric. You don't want to overlap your seam, but you want enough fabric that you can securely stitch this. So basically you're turning under a quarter and you're leaving yourself 3/8 of an inch to stitch on. So I've folded over that 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to, on the sewing machine, stitch along the edge of that fold to create a nice, neat edge to my fabric. So you would use this on the inside of something where the seams might show, like if you did a little jacket and you wanted it to look nice on the inside, you might do this sort of seam treatment. So I'm trying to sew, pretty close to the edge. The best thing to do is to be looking at your needle and where it's striking the fabric, instead of looking at the seam mark. When you're sewing a seam, most of the time you want to be looking at that 5/8 inch or whatever number you're using to create a seam. But here we're sewing along the edge of a piece of fabric, so it's better if you kind of sort of look at the edge of the fabric where the needle's hitting that fabric so that you can maintain a nice straight line. It's going to take some practice to get it really straight. So that's why we're doing this samples, is so that you can, practice sewing different types of seams and different edges and that before you actually start making a garment. So you flip it around and you do the same thing at the other side. So I'm back stitching and then I'm stitching along my edge. And then when I'm finished, I'm going to press my seam open, and that will be it. It will be done. So again, I'm stitching with black thread because I want you to be able to see the stitching more than if this was really going in a garment, you would most likely use matching thread so that it would look nice. Let me press this for you. So my seam is complete. I'm going to hold it up here so you can see it, and you can see that it's got a pretty nice even dimension and good stitching. And then when you turn it to the outside, of course, it just looks like a plain seam. So use it for the inside of garments where you want seams to look really nice. I have a friend who's a designer, and she uses this particular seam on a lot of the clothing that she makes. She's really fond of this one. I do more French seams. So both of them are, extra steps in stitching, but you really have a nice outcome when you're finished. So that's it for this sample.